Hi, I'm Steve Price, and sitting next to me is my good friend and collaborator, Buddy Doyle. Buddy is a photographer, he's a graphic artist, and he's also a writer. And all of your talents and skills, Buddy, are on display in this new book that you've created, Where Maine Reads. This is a unique book, a large format book of photographic portraits of Mainers of all stripes, some famous, some very famous, but mostly ordinary people who you captured reading in their favorite reading spots. And each photographic subject also contributed a short essay about what reading means to them. So not only is it a very beautiful book, it's also a very readable book, appropriate to the title. I'll let you talk about the origin story, which is quite interesting, but I do want to mention that from the very beginning, you envisioned this project as a nonprofit enterprise or working with a nonprofit partner. And in fact, after a couple pitches, Maine Public decided to be the nonprofit partner for this book and its media sponsor, seeing how it aligned very well with their mission and ethos. And so the sales of this book, proceeds from the sale of this book, go to supporting Maine Public's literacy programs for children across the state. So when you buy this book, and we can talk a little bit more at the end where it's available, including Graves Library, the Maine Public and its literacy programs benefit. So, Buddy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the origin of this, the evolution of how this book came about?
I don't recall exactly what event sparked the idea. It probably jumped out of a bowl of cornflakes or off an English muffin or a libation, actually. But anyway, the idea was to photograph Mainers of all walks of life, if you will. A book doesn't, it just dawned on me that a book doesn't really care who's reading it. And I wanted to kind of cover the spectrum of people who read in the state of Maine. The idea floated around for quite a while. And one night, my wife and I were reading in bed, that's our favorite place, and probably maybe yours. And I was rereading Stephen King's memoir on writing. It's almost 20 years old or more now, and I was rereading it. I read it way back then. And I came up on page bottom of 104, I came upon these words. So I read when I can, but I have a favorite place, and probably you do too, a place where the light is good and the vibe is usually strong. For me, it's a blue chair in my study. For you, it might be the couch on the sun porch, a rocker in the kitchen, or maybe it's propped up in your bed. Reading in bed can be heaven, assuming you get just the right amount of light on the page and aren't prone to spilling your coffee or cognac on the sheets. I said, that's it, I chirped aloud. I woke my wife. She rolled over to ask, what's it, other than 2 o'clock in the morning? Stephen King just validated my project. Congratulations, now go to sleep. Elated, I spilled my bourbon, nightcap, changed the sheets, and woke up the next morning with a plan. And this is what happened next. And then it goes into the body of the book.
So be it. Interesting origin story. So this is obviously a book about reading. So we are going to read some of the essays that have been contributed to this book. And I'm going to start by reading an essay by someone who needs no introduction to this audience, Mary Lou Bucavalis, who's the executive director of Graves Library, and also the 2023 Maine Librarian of the Year. So if you want to hold up her picture, page 17.
17? Sorry. Here we are.
Okay, so Mary Lou writes, when people ask me what I do for a living and I tell them that I am a librarian, their immediate response is, wow, you must read a lot of books. The truth of the matter is that, first, I am the slowest reader on the planet. And second, by the time I get home at night, I'm usually too tired to dive into the latest crime novel or engaging memoir. I save my reading time for Saturday or Sunday afternoons when the weather is good, all my chores are done, and I have a solid block of time to sit in this chair on this deck by this river. It is my favorite place to find out who done it in the latest David Baldacci or John Grisham novel, or to learn someone's best truth from their life's tale. Being able to read is such a tremendous gift. There is beauty and joy in the ability to relax, learn, and escape to new places right from the comforts of your very own special spot.
In the course of finding readers, I harken back to a book I actually did in 2009, photographing members of the Maine National Guard at their civilian professions. Many of them had been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. I called upon a very good friend of mine who knows everybody in the Guard. He works in the Pentagon now, and I asked him to come up with a name, any name. And he came up with Major Phil Dow, who is the chaplain for the Maine National Guard. I called Phil up and explained what I was looking to accomplish. And I said, "Where do you read?" And he said, "Buddy, I travel all over the state of Maine preaching. And a lot of times I'll drive my old beat up green truck into the woods and just sit there in the ambiance and the quiet and maybe some sounds of nature, birds and so forth." And Phil wrote this: "The scribbling of shapes to communicate, markings that can last a millennia, is perhaps one of the most fascinating behaviors that makes us uniquely human. Some of my favorite aspects of Maine culture are articulated in anecdotal form by local legends of the pen like John Gould, John Ford, E.B. White, and Edmund Ware Smith. As a military chaplain, remunerating consistently in the profound markings that make up the Holy Scripture has had an indelible impact on my life. I've learned that when we allow ourselves quiet moments to step away from our insatiably fast-paced lives and read, we can glean wisdom, knowledge, and insight into times, cultures, and places that are far beyond our present and very temporal existence. Finding that place where you can be at ease makes the act of reading that much more sacred. For me, it is often well off the beaten path where there's no trouble finding peace, quiet, and solitude. I encourage you to make reading a habit, as it is a potential to pave the way to truly follow the greatest commandments, to love thy God and love thy neighbor as thyself." I found that very profound. I'm grateful to Phil.
It's so very interesting. There's such great diversity in this book and people's different perspectives on reading. I mean, we all have reasons why we read and what we love to read, but it's just fascinating to hear what other people think about that. So my next reading is going to be from someone that I'm sure most of you know, particularly if you are readers of the Portland newspapers. It's Bill Nemetz, who was the premier columnist in the state of Maine for many years, probably a couple decades. He traveled the world. He went to military bases. He was on TV. You'd see him occasionally on MSNBC being interviewed. He was a superstar in our state and regional journalism business. So you'll see this wonderful photo of him with his grandchildren. Bill writes, "When my son Eric was but a toddler, we took him and his older sister one summer evening to his first July 4th fireworks celebration. We spread out the blanket and passed around the snacks, and then as darkness fell, boom, the first pyrotechnic exploded brilliantly above our heads. Eric, acting purely on juvenile instinct, dove under the blanket. And there he stayed quivering for several minutes before summoning the courage during a brief lull to peek out from under his makeshift shelter. Worried eyes trained warily upward, he announced, 'I think I should have bought a book.' 4 decades later, as we fret over virtual reality and artificial intelligence and all the other forces competing for the eyes and minds of our kids, we can still find solace in the timeless power of the written word. Open a children's book to the first page and, magically, a gaggle of gleeful grandkids goes silent, eyes fixated on the type and illustrations, following Grandpa's figure as he draws imaginary lines from phrase to picture, picture to phrase. Glancing around at them as I read aloud, I marvel at the transformation. They're still there nestled in around me, but at the same time, they've gone somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere secure and at the same time thrilling beyond words. Bliss doesn't begin to describe it. When you're a grandparent, kids look to you for advice, at least that's what I tell myself. And as they navigate a world that even I find frightening in my old age, I have a lot to share about paying attention to what's going on around you, about standing up to bullies, about doing what you know deep down is right, even if it means doing it alone. In short, I tell them, be brave. And just to be safe, don't forget to bring a book.
Another experience, and I had a lot of terrific experiences putting this book together. Or I should say one of the ideas that I really wanted to pursue was to interview or or photograph someone who is a member of our correctional system. You hear an awful lot these days about people who are incarcerated, getting an education, learning how to read, a trade, and so forth. So I employed my friend Randall Liberty, who is the Commissioner of Corrections of the state of Maine, to find someone who would be suitable to this project. And God, I was fortunate to run into Victoria Scott, who is a guest at the Women's Reentry Center in Wyndham. And she was the only reader who was totally prepared. I mentioned to her as I was photographing her that she would have to render an essay on reading, and I'd give her some time to do that. And she goes, "Oh, here it is right here." I mean, she was just terrific. And she wrote this. My world was always small, but upon being incarcerated, it became even smaller. Always a lover of books, the pages became a window, expanding my imagination, understanding, and possibilities beyond the walls. Books became my safe place and a saving grace in atmospheres that were austere, unfriendly, or where I felt other. Through the words on every page, I vicariously explored the evocative humanity, memories, places, and emotions that motivated me to learn to grow and to aspire to live as authentically as possible. My passion for reading and the unique human connections born by sharing a good book led me to learn my facilitation certificate with the Maine Humanities Council. Our first discussion group read Man's Searching for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I was awestruck by how the women devoured the words and compared, contrasted, and applied the story's wisdom to their own experiences of incarceration. Imprisoned, you are surrounded by suffering. You offer relief where you can, but part of you becomes deadened, desensitized to the pain. You must create purpose to survive. The poignant lessons resonated deeply with the women as simple truths, that suffering can be transformative and life holds only meaning that we give it. I would like to say that there's some marvelous essays in this book, but I dare you to find one more poignant than that. Steve knows I've got an affection for that essay.
Yeah, we both do. I mean, she was an early contributor, and when we got hers, we both went, wow, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, we were on to something. Then we were on to something.
Yes, exactly. We knew we were on something. A lot of special essays in here, but hers stands out. The last essay that I'm going to read is from someone that you may know or know of, and it's Joshua Bodwell. Joshua grew up in this area, and he's been associated with Graves Library for many years. I've known Josh for a long time, and when I first met him, he was just starting out on his literary career as a poet and a short story writer, very good in both respects. And a few years later, he became a journalist, worked for a local newspaper, got that experience under his belt. And then Josh was hired as the director of the Maine Writers Alliance, as I believe it was called then. Now it's the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. And Josh, through his talent, his skill, his hard work, really put that organization on the map. And it's become a very important organization in the lives of many writers and publishers, people in the book business, and just writing in general. But to a large degree, he made that organization what it is today. And today, Josh has a new job. He's editorial director of Godine and Black Sparrow Press, which is based, I believe, in the greater Boston area, but Josh still lives among us. He lives in Biddeford. So Josh writes, "The most important books in my life have arrived by serendipity. As a teenager, I stumbled upon one enormous literary discovery after another. My father handed down his worn paperback editions of James Wright and Denise Levertov when I was 15. On my 17th birthday, he gifted me Charles Bukowski's Septuagenarian Stew. In between, when I was 16, I found a coffee-stained copy of Raymond Carver's Where I'm Calling From, abandoned on a table at a local cafe. These books, along with others, formed a loose framework in my mind as I tried to understand how literature works or doesn't work. Today, everything I read has informed my efforts as an editor. I strive to read and understand a manuscript deeply enough so that I might help a writer achieve the best possible version of their objectives on the page. This isn't simply about syntax or grammatical rules. In fact, it's hardly ever about grammatical rules, but is instead a matter of the feeling and tone and intentions of the work. I read and edit manuscripts in my Noel Rysam chair, first manufactured in the early 1940s under wartime material restrictions. The chair was originally constructed of a maple frame and discarded parachute webbing. I admire the marriage of practicality and high aesthetic. The chair is comfortable enough to sit in for hours, but not so comfortable that one risks dozing off. I sit beside an east-facing window in a circa 1840s textile mill above the Saco River. In the summertime, it is cool there in the afternoon, with breezes off the water. On the bookshelves nearby sit the books I first read in my teens, alongside the books I've edited. So this book is now available at this time in more than 20 bookstores throughout the state of Maine. But it's also available at Graves Library and for sale here down in the bookseller. And proceeds, as I mentioned, go to Maine Public for their literacy programs. But if you buy the book at Graves Library, Graves has some financial benefit as well. So love for you to come in and take a look at it and possibly walk out with it. Any final words you'd like to say, buddy?
Sure, yeah. I sure do have some final words. I want to thank everybody that participated. Senator Angus King wrote the foreword for me. Governor Mills, thank you, ma'am. And everybody else, but especially Steve Wallace at the Maine State Credit Union up in Augusta, who funded my creative efforts. Otherwise, I'm not that comfortably retired. I wouldn't have been able to do this project. And so, Steve, thank you. There is a rumor that a sequel might be in order, but that's for another day. But anyway, I want to thank the Graves Library, too, and Mary Lou for allowing us to do this.
Yeah, agreed. Just obviously couldn't have done it without participation of many, many people. And my role primarily was as editor and did some fundraising and just kind of helping things move along. And it's been a pleasure.
And with that, we can fade out while I shake Steve's hand.
Thank you. It's a great book.